Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am your host, and today we are tackling something that I think most of us just sort of assume we understand.
Right, because we've all lived in a house, so we think we know how to sell one.
Exactly.
Right.
But if we are being honest, it is usually a total guessing game. We are talking about selling a home, and our mission today is to completely deconstruct the standard playbook. You know the one. You stick a sign in the yard, you upload some photos you took on your phone,
Maybe hire a pro if you're feeling fancy.
right, if you're fancy, and then you just sit back and wait for the bidding war.
Which is really just the classic hope and pray method. And, to be fair, in a wildly overheated market, that might accidentally work. You can be sloppy and still get lucky.
But the research we are looking at today, specifically a framework called the market positioning system, argues that luck is not a strategy.
It absolutely is not.
No. And what really grabbed me about this source material is that it distinguishes between marketing a home and positioning it. Because marketing, it just feels like shouting, house for sale, into the void. But positioning feels, I don't know, surgical. It's engineered.
It is an engineered process. That is the exact right word. The system treats the sale of a property not as this highly emotional life event, but as an asset divestiture governed by hard data.
Which takes the ego right out of it.
Completely. And they break this system down into three integrated pillars. You have exposure engineering, conversion optimization, and leverage protection.
I love exposure engineering. It sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
It does.
But before we get to the cool spy stuff, we really have to start where the system starts, which is the reality check, or what they call market calibration. Now, usually when people decide to sell, they look at what their neighbor sold for maybe 3 months ago. They add 10 grand because, they like their own kitchen cabinets better.
Of course they do.
And then they just pick a price.
Which is the single fastest way to fail. The market positioning system argues that before you even whisper a price, you have to establish market reality. You have to know the actual tempo of the neighborhood. The market has a pulse, and if you aren't synced up with it, you get left behind.
And our source lists 3 specific metrics for this calibration. I want to dig into them for you listening because they are not the vanity metrics people usually brag about. The first one is average days on market, or DOM.
Right. Think of DOM as a stopwatch that starts the exact second you go live. It defines your natural leverage window. Every neighborhood has a rhythm. So if the average home sells in 12 days and you're sitting there on day 20, you've crossed an invisible line.
But does that really matter? I mean, think about it. The house hasn't changed. It is the exact same bricks and mortar on day 20 as it was on day 1. Why does the buyer care?
Because buyers are inherently suspicious. It's what we call the stale bread effect.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, if you walk into a bakery and you see a loaf of bread that's been sitting there for a week, you just assume something is wrong with it, even if it looks perfectly fine.
Right, you're not going to buy it.
Exactly. So on day 20 in a 12-day market, the buyer perception shifts from, oh, wow, a fresh opportunity, to,
What's wrong with it?
yes, what's wrong with it? Or, I bet they're getting desperate. You literally lose negotiation power simply by existing on the market for too long.
Okay, that makes total sense. The smell of desperation is very real.
Yeah.
Now, the second metric was the list-to-sale price ratio. And reading through this one felt like a massive ego check for sellers.
It is the reality gap. It measures the difference between what a seller hopes to get and what the market actually pays.
So give us an example.
Okay, if homes in your zip code are listed at $500,000, but they are consistently closing at $480,000.
That's a 96% ratio.
Exactly. That 96% tells you that buyers in this specific area are aggressive. They are accustomed to negotiating down.
Versus a market where everything sells for, say, 102% of the list price.
Right. So if you price at the very top of the range in a 96% market, you're dead in the water. You have to price knowing that the buyers are going to come in swinging. You have to anticipate that negotiation behavior, not just look at the final sold prices and assume you'll get your list price.
That is such a crucial distinction. Now, the third metric was the one that I had literally never considered before, showing volume required per offer, which is basically just a conversion rate for your house, right?
Yes, and it takes the emotion entirely out of the "is my house doing okay" question. Let's say the data for your zip code shows it typically takes 10 showings to generate one solid offer. That 10 is your benchmark.
So if I've been on the market for 2 weeks and I've had 15 showings but 0 offers.
Then you have a positioning problem. Actually, you have a rejection problem. I know, it's harsh, but the market is actively telling you that people are interested enough in the photos to come inside. So your marketing worked. But once they stepped through the front door, the actual real-world value didn't match the price tag.
So you aren't just, waiting for the right buyer?
No, you are statistically failing the conversion test, period.
That is harsh, but it's deeply helpful. It stops you from just blaming the weather or saying, oh, it's the holiday weekend. Okay, so we have calibrated. We know the speed and the reality of the market. Now we get to the part that genuinely surprised me. Section 2, exposure engineering, and specifically what the system calls the psychology of brackets.
This is where almost everyone messes up, mostly because they think like sellers, not like buyers. A seller wants a very specific number, like $432,000, because that specific number nets them the cash they need for their next house.
Right.
But buyers do not search for $432,000.
No, of course not. Nobody types that exact number into a search bar.
Nobody types anything in anymore. They use the slider or the drop-down menus on Zillow or Redfin. And those menus are rigid. They are almost always set in $25,000 or $50,000 increments.
400K, 425, 450.
Exactly. Those are the brackets.
So the system argues that every single bracket is its own little ecosystem.
It really is. Every bracket has its own unique supply, its own demand, and its own completely different audience of buyers. And understanding this leads directly to what they call the intersection strategy.
Okay, I want to walk through this slowly because I actually had to read this part of the source material twice to really get the math. Let's say I want to sell my house for around $425,000 or maybe $430,000. The natural instinct, based on everything we know about retail, is to price it at $429,000 because it looks cheaper than $430,000.
Classic retail pricing, and it is a total disaster for real estate.
Why? Break that down for me.
Think about the search brackets. If you price your home at $429,000, which search results do you actually appear in?
I'd appear for the buyer looking from $425,000 up to $450,000.
Right. You are at the very bottom of their list, price-wise. But who are you completely invisible to?
Oh, I'm invisible to the buyer looking from $375,000 up to $425,000.
Exactly. You miss that entire group of eager buyers by just $4,000.
I see. So I am completely invisible to the lower group, and I am essentially just the cheap option for the higher group.
Well, being the cheap option isn't always terrible, but you've literally cut your potential audience in half. Now, let's look at what the system calls strategic boundary positioning. Imagine you price that exact same home at exactly $425,000, right on the boundary line.
Then I show up in both searches.
Yes. You become the reach home for the buyer looking up to $425,000. It's the absolute nicest house they can afford. And simultaneously, you are the value home for the buyer starting their search at $425,000. You have successfully intersected two completely different demand pools.
That is wild. You've essentially doubled your total addressable market just by moving the price a tiny fraction of a percent.
Because your goal is to dominate inside the bracket. You want maximum visibility where the demand is strongest relative to the supply. You definitely don't want to be floating in that dead zone where nobody sees you just because you tried to get cute with a $429,900 price tag.
Okay, so we've engineered the price to get the absolute most eyeballs. Now we have to actually sell the house to the humans who show up. Which brings us to narrative architecture. And the tagline here in the source is, stats tell, stories sell. Which, I will be honest with you, sounds a little bit like a cheesy marketing bumper sticker.
It does sound like a bumper sticker, but it addresses a very real problem. Most real estate listings are incredibly boring. They're just data dumps.
4 beds, 3 baths, 2,000 square feet, granite counters.
Right. And that data helps a buyer filter their search, but it does absolutely nothing to help them feel anything about the property.
The document talks heavily about memory moments. Basically, instead of just listing out the features, you're supposed to sit down and ask the seller, where did life actually happen in this house?
It is all about emotional anchoring. If you write large living room in the listing, the buyer forgets it 10 minutes after reading it. But if you describe it as the exact spot where holiday mornings unfolded, or the sunroom where we drink coffee every Sunday, you are planting a visualization directly into the buyer's brain.
You aren't just selling drywall and floorboards, you are selling a future ritual.
Precise.
But then they take it a step further with a concept called the identifier. They suggest actually giving the house a specific name. And I have to push back a little here. Isn't calling your standard three-bedroom ranch, you know, the Bennett Bungalow or the Venetian Corner a little bit cheesy? It feels like something a luxury resort would do, not a normal house.
Well, it can feel cheesy if you overdo it. You
Right.
definitely don't want to call a standard house the Palace of Dreams.
Right.
But think about the reality of the buyer's experience. They are out there on a Saturday. They're going to see maybe 8 different houses back to back. By house number 5, they are totally exhausted. They are hungry. All the houses are blurring together. They're sitting in the car saying, wait, was the blue house the one with the weird carpet, or was that the one with the nice pool?
No, the blue house was the one right next to the noisy highway.
Exactly. Confusion is the enemy of a sale. By giving the home a specific, memorable name, let's say the Venetian Corner, because it implies a specific location or architectural vibe, you give the buyers a mental shorthand. Later that night, when they are talking over a glass of wine, they just say, I really liked the Venetian Corner. It sticks in their mind. If a house is easier to talk about, it is fundamentally easier to buy.
So it's branding. You are
Yeah.
effectively branding what is otherwise a commodity, so it stands out on the retail shelf.
100%. You are deliberately creating a hook for their memory.
Okay, I will buy that. But the branding actually has to look good, right?
Yeah.
We live in a scroll-based world. If the thumb doesn't stop, the showing never happens. And the system talks about visual and digital execution, specifically tools like the Zillow Showcase. Is this really just about paying extra money to get your photos to look bigger online?
No, it's about visual hierarchy. The data clearly shows that random photo orders absolutely kill buyer interest. Most agents, they just upload the photos in the exact order the photographer took them.
So it's like front of the house, then the kitchen, then a random close-up of a toilet, and then the backyard.
Right. It's totally disjointed.
It's extremely disorienting.
Yeah.
As a buyer, you can't figure out the floor plan at all.
And as we just said, confusion causes hesitation. The strategy here is to group the photos logically. You put all the kitchen shots together, all the primary suite shots together, and then you combine that with technology like interactive floor plans or a sky tour where you can literally digitally fly through the home.
I have to admit, I love those 3D tours, mostly just because I'm nosy and like looking at people's stuff.
Yeah.
But you were saying it actually acts as a filter for buyers.
It aggressively filters out the looky-loos. Think about it. If someone can walk through the entire house digitally, see the layout, see the sizes, and they still take the time to book an in-person showing, they are a high-intent buyer. They already understand the layout. They aren't coming over to kick the tires. They are coming to confirm their existing interest.
So we have hooked the buyer online. But there is another person in this transaction that we usually completely ignore, and the system focuses heavily on them. The buyer's agent. They call this pillar buyer agent enablement, which confused me at first. I thought the agent was supposed to be the market expert. Why do we, as the sellers, need to enable them?
Because agents are human, and honestly, some of them are just lazy, or they are juggling 10 clients and are incredibly busy.
Sure.
If an agent has to call you to find out how old the roof is, or exactly what the HOA fees cover, or which elementary school district the house is actually in,
They might just not make the phone call.
or worse, they might subconsciously steer their client toward the house 3 streets over where the listing agent already uploaded all of that info in a nice, clean PDF. The path of least resistance always wins.
So the strategy they recommend is the one-pager.
Actually, it's 2 one-pagers. You have the buyer-facing one, which is all about radical transparency. It lists average utility costs, exact dates of upgrades, lifestyle perks like, hey, it's walkable to the dog park. It answers all their objections before they even happen.
And that second one.
The agent-facing one, that is the actual secret weapon.
What goes on that one?
Basically talking points. It has the commission details and closing logistics, sure, but more importantly, it spells out the value proposition. You are essentially handing the buyer's agent a script to make them look incredibly smart to their own client. You give them lines like, hey, notice how this home is positioned relative to the school zone. You are literally feeding them the lines to sell your house.
Oh, I see. You are making it effortless for them to be the hero in front of their client.
And if you make their job that easy, they will advocate fiercely for your property.
Okay, so let's say we've done all of this. We've launched. We are live on the market. We have the perfect bracket pricing, the beautiful photos, the catchy identifier name, the agent cheat sheets. Everything is ready. But let's say it's just not working. The market is crickets. This brings us to the leverage protection pillar. And the system talks about a strict 14-day review, which sounds a little ominous.
It is meant to be a hard stop. Peak leverage is always the first 2 weeks on the market. That is when you absolutely have the most eyes on your listing. If you get to day 14 and your showing volume is lagging behind that benchmark we talked about earlier.
Like if you're at 3 showings instead of the neighborhood average of 10.
Exactly. If you are lagging that badly, you cannot just say, let's wait and see what happens after the weekend.
Because waiting is passive.
Waiting destroys your leverage. The system outlines a relaunch surge protocol. And it isn't just a basic price drop, it is a full perception reset. You might change the main hero photo, completely rewrite the narrative description, and adjust the price all at the exact same time. You have to aggressively signal to the market that this is a fresh start, not just a slow, desperate bleed.
Speaking of price adjustments, this is the part of the deep dive that I need us to really slow down for. They call it incentive impact modeling. It is the math of price versus payment. And when I first read this section in the source material, I actually got out my phone calculator because I simply did not believe it.
Most people don't believe it until they sit down and run the numbers themselves.
So let's walk through the scenario they give. You have a house listed at $500,000, but it is stalling. Now, the typical knee-jerk move is to just cut the price by $10,000 to show buyers you are serious and motivated.
Right. You drop the price down to $490,000. And as a seller, you feel like you have just given up a massive chunk of your hard-earned equity. It physically hurts.
But let's look at it from the buyer side of the table. If I am the buyer and I am taking out a standard 30-year mortgage at, let's just say, 7% interest, how much does that painful $10,000 price cut actually save me on my monthly mortgage payment?
It saves the buyer about $53 a month.
That is insane to me. $10,000 of the seller's actual equity is just gone, vanished, and the buyer gets what, a pizza night?
A pretty cheap pizza night at that.
Yeah.
It is practically irrelevant to their monthly budget. A $50 difference does not change their affordability picture or convince someone who is on the fence.
Okay, so then they present option B, the rate buy down. Explain how this works, because instead of dropping the price, the seller keeps the list price firm at $500,000. But they offer the buyer a $10,000 credit at closing specifically to buy down their interest rate.
Right. So you take that exact same $10,000 in cash and you use it to pay points on the buyer's mortgage up front. That structured credit might permanently drop the buyer's interest rate from 7% down to, say, 6.25%.
And what does that do to their actual monthly payment?
That lower rate could easily reduce their mortgage payment by nearly $200 every single month.
Wait, pause right there. Let's make this crystal clear.
Yeah.
The out-of-pocket cost to the seller is absolutely identical. They're out 10 grand in both scenarios.
It is the exact same identical net to the seller.
But in one scenario, the buyer saves $50, and in the other, they save $200. That is almost a 4x impact on their wallet. Why on earth would anyone ever choose to do a basic price cut?
Because people don't do the math. They react emotionally to a stalling market. A price cut feels very clean and simple. You just change the number online. A rate buy-down requires a little bit of explanation and strategy. But you have to remember, buyers are entirely payment-driven. They do not live inside the price of the home. They live inside that monthly mortgage payment. If you solve their payment problem, you will sell the house.
And it protects your neighborhood comps too, right? Because if you sell at $500,000 with a credit on the back end, the officially recorded sale price is still $500,000. Your neighbors will absolutely love you.
And the appraiser loves you. You have successfully preserved the comparable value of the asset while simultaneously solving the very real affordability friction for the buyer. It truly is the ultimate leverage move.
It really just highlights the massive difference between selling a house and positioning an asset. Because selling is just, I hope someone really likes my living room. Positioning is saying, I am going to engineer the financing so that my house becomes the single most affordable option on this block.
That's exactly it. It is about taking proactive control of variables that most amateur sellers think are completely out of their hands.
So when we step back and look at this entire market positioning system as a whole, I have to admit, it's kind of intimidating. It is a lot of hard work. You have to analyze the search brackets, write a compelling story, logically organize the visual hierarchy, prep the agents with cheat sheets, and deeply model the financing math.
It is a lot of work. Nobody's denying that. But you have to ask yourself, what is the alternative? The alternative is potentially leaving tens of thousands of dollars sitting on the table. The shift we're talking about today is fundamentally a mindset shift. You have to stop thinking of your home as your personal place, and you have to start treating it as a product sitting on a very crowded retail shelf. How is it packaged? How is it priced relative to the very specific bracket competition? And most importantly, how easy is it to actually buy?
How easy is it to buy? I really like that framing. We almost always focus entirely on how hard it is to sell.
Exactly. If you successfully remove the friction, whether that friction is buyer confusion about a weird floor plan, or an overworked agent who doesn't have the info, or a cripplingly high monthly payment, the market will absolutely reward you for it.
I want to leave everyone listening with a bit of a challenge today based on this deep dive. We have talked about a lot of high-level tactical stuff, but I want you to literally just look around your own house today. Even if you aren't planning on selling anytime soon, look around. Could you name it? Do you actually know what your home's memory moments are, or is it really just a collection of bedrooms and bathrooms to you?
Because if you can't tell the story of your own home, you definitely cannot expect a random buyer to figure it out on a Saturday afternoon.
Exactly. Start thinking about your home's narrative right now, and all that complicated math might just take care of itself later. Thank you so much for exploring this deep dive with us. We will catch you on the next one.